Welcome to IRA. So I don't know if you could hear me. I'll do the intro from the top again. I just realized that my mic wasn't working. So tonight's episode of IRA focuses on the two Davids. That would be Hamblin and Leavitt. Now, many of you know David Leavitt from his time as Utah County Attorney and the controversies thereof, including that disastrous 2022 press conference in which he denied the existence of an organized satanic ritual abuse ring, organized ring of abuse, period. He discounted all of it. He said that the young woman who had filled out the victim statement in question that had been leaked to him by a member of the press was tragically mentally ill. As we're going to see, that young woman wasn't tragically mentally ill in the years leading up to that, because David Leavitt was talking about ritual abuse as a very real phenomenon, said that he knew it was real in the years leading up to the Hamblin case blowing wide open in 2022, thanks to Utah County Sheriff's Office and Sheriff Mike Smith blowing it open, as well as David Leavitt's political opponents and his enemies blowing it open for their own purposes. And those purposes had nothing to do with holding David Hamblin or David Leavitt or any of the other people named in those 8 victim statements accountable for what they did to children. Instead, what it had to do with was basically getting David Leavitt out of office. And so they spent God knows how many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, doing so under the guise of a prosecution. And so we're going to examine 2 things tonight. One is David Leavitt's own incriminating statements in an interview that he did with a documentarian named Amy Hurdy, which Hurdy was asking him about his illegal adoption of a Native American girl, as well as the allegations of satanic ritual abuse. Now, Hurdy's documentary has been shelved. It's never been made public, but clips of it were provided to the media through law enforcement sources for obvious reasons. Some of those law enforcement sources wanted to see David Leavitt prosecuted for his involvement in multiple trafficking and abuse rings, and others just wanted to see David Leavitt removed from office. They didn't like his prosecutorial policies, felt that he was too soft on crime. And so they basically got rid of him, and the Hamblin case was how they did it. So without further ado, let's take a look at David Leavitt and what he had to say about satanic ritual abuse back in the day. So here's
Watch and listen. More than 2 years before that press conference, Leavitt sat down for a different interview and was asked if he thought ritualistic sex abuse was real. He went on to describe Hamblin and his own accuser, calling her a victim.
Do I think that occurs? Yeah, I think it occurs. I know some victims of it. Yeah, I know some victims of it. I was not in a position to prosecute it. Who was into Native American stuff, had killed deer and get deer hearts and drink their blood and drink the deer's blood.
At the time, Leavitt was under investigation by Homeland Security. These clips are now evidence in that case. We want to warn you, some of them are very graphic.
How do you train a dog to roll over when it's time to roll over? You know, you do it by giving a reward and repetition. If a man wants to program some little girl to give him oral sex anytime he wants to, you start young and give rewards. You know, I mean, it's unfortunately I've never, you know, it's the same way you help a child learn how to make their bed.
Yesterday, after Hamblin's arrest, we asked David Leavitt through his spokesperson for a comment. We were told, no, he does not comment on pending cases. Apparently, that did not stop him in June.
So you get the basic idea here. In that clip, you see David Leavitt talking about how he knew that satanic ritual abuse was real, that it did happen, that he knew a victim of it. That victim was the same young woman that he later characterized as tragically mentally ill. That would be Catherine Hamblin. And so he acknowledges the reality of this years before he denies and discounts the idea that it isn't real. So he discounts it. He says there's no organized ring of ritual abuse, and as a result, he's sitting there and saying this to everybody who will listen at this press conference. These allegations are bunk. They're bogus. Because what he finds out in 2022, thanks to the victim statement being leaked to him, is that he's in it. He's accused by Catherine Hamblin and her sisters of being one of their abusers. That's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with a county attorney. Before he was the chief prosecutor in Utah County, he was the chief prosecutor in Juab County. And he is simultaneously, at the time that he's a prosecutor in Juab County and also at the time that he's a prosecutor in Utah County, he is simultaneously a pedophile, a ritual abuser. Some of the more serious allegations against David Leavitt are that he provided children to the group that David Lee Hamblin was a part of, the group that called itself the group when it was in mixed company, or the Church of Satan when it was in common company, that is, the members of the group were around each other. So that's what we're dealing with in this respect. Now, in 2013, before he was arrested, Hamblin was on a recorded line. It's called a pretext call. Provo Police Department had him on a pretext call with his daughter, Catherine, or Katie, before he was arrested. And during that pretext call, which is about 41 minutes in length, he explicitly apologizes to his daughter and says, "I am sorry for raping you." Now, despite this, in 2014, the next year, the Utah County Attorney's Office, prior to David Leavitt being elected to that office, I might add, the Utah County Attorney's Office drops the charges against him. Says that they're having difficulty locating discovery material to turn over to the defense. And so they dismiss the charges without prejudice. Now, fast forward to 2022, they arrest him again. This time, Utah County Attorney's Office is disqualified, obviously, because the current county attorney is David Leavitt. He was the county attorney at the time, and he is allegedly an accomplice of David Lee Hamblin, according to the original victim statements in the original criminal investigation from 2012 to 2014. So obviously there's a conflict of interest. So he holds a disastrous press conference in mid-2022 in which he denies being a Satanist, a pedophile, a cannibal, as you do. And then he proceeds to implode his political career. Jeff Gray winds up winning the race, and David Lee Hamblin winds up being arrested in September of that year for charges related to his alleged abuse of Emily Sheets. And in October of that year, he's arrested again for charges related to his abuse of a 5-year-old boy at the time, who was his therapy patient named Tobias Schroeder. So he's got 2 child victims, neither of which he was arrested for earlier in the 2012 to 2014 investigation, and he's charged with multiple counts of abuse against each of them. Now, in February of this year, the second special prosecutor, Nathan Evershed, drops the charges. Says that there are, again, evidentiary issues, that there are issues that the original special prosecutor did not turn over exculpatory materials to Hamblin's defense attorneys Michael Petro and Lee Ashton. Michael Petro actually worked for David Leavitt as part of the Leavitt Institute, David Leavitt's nonprofits efforts in the Ukraine. So the Leavitt Institute purports to train Eastern European attorneys and jurists in the American system of justice, and as such, it takes men like Michael Petro, that is, American attorneys and American lawyers, American judges, American legal professionals, sends them over to teach in Eastern European universities and law schools so that we can export our system of justice to their countries. Now, it just so happens that the Leavitt Institute is active in countries that have a notorious issue with sex trafficking. That is, the Ukraine, Moldova, Romania, and Poland. Those are 4 that are listed in the Leavitt Institute's website as being places or countries where they operate. And so that's David Leavitt. He allegedly provided a boy from the Greens, that's the direct quote from the victim statements, who was later murdered in Spring City by David Lee Hamlin's group. He was sacrificed. That's according to Leavitt, or Hamlin's daughters. He allegedly raped at least 2 of the Hamlin children at his home in Nephi when he lived in Nephi. He now lives in Orem. And also in Scotland, where he has bought a castle that he's remodeling. That castle is Knockdeary Castle. You can follow their social media postings on Instagram and on YouTube because they are posting the renovations that they're doing to Knockdeary Castle. So here we go. We've got David Leavitt. You just saw the Leavitt training video where he says, how do you train a dog to comply with things? You use reinforcement, you use treats and everything, and he analogizes training a dog to training a child to comply with rape and sexual abuse. Poor choice of words, but what do I know? I'm not the scion and heir to one of the richest men in Utah, Dixie Leavitt. I'm not the younger brother of Mike Leavitt, the former multi-term governor of Utah, who was also the Secretary of Health and Human Services and the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency under George W. Bush's administration. So the next clip I want to play is of David Lee Hamblin talking about how he had sex with his clients, an act for which he was stripped of his license to practice as a clinical psychologist by the Utah Division of Occupational and Professional Licensing. So he has recently started a new live stream where he talks about his methods as a quote-unquote medicine man. You can see that on Archaeology of the Soul. That's what it's called on YouTube. It's got a funky spelling, A-R-K-E instead of A-R-C-H. Archaeology of the Soul. You can also Google Mother Earth Manifesta. That's his latest free self-printed PDF. In a future live stream, we'll be reviewing his book, The Righteous Branch, which I've been kind of digesting for about 2 years now since I got a hold of it. Just kind of tracing all the little threads between that and obscure Mormon doctrine and history. And so that's something to look for in a future episode. But without further ado, I want to play you a 2-minute clip from his most recent live stream in which he admits that he did, in fact, have sex with his clients. But he says he acted out of compassion. He says that he was having sex with his patients out of compassion, that he was motivated by altruism, and that the sexual contact with his mentally ill patients in therapy, it worked for some of them, it didn't work for others. And it was also triggering as hell for him. So here's that clip, which is just absolutely batshit.
At the time, I had a limited skill set and a limited set of tools, and a number of things happened that led me down the path of being sexual with some of my clients. And it actually helped with a couple, and it didn't work with a couple of people. Not so much. And part of that is because I thought I could do it, and it required more of me than I could do, and I was triggered to hell by it too. And during that time, when it felt like all was lost, I was invited to a Native American church peyote sacrament meeting. And it was a revelation to me. And I'll tell you that peyote is a sacred herb and saved my life, really. And it gave me the power to go on despite my mistakes. And they are mistakes and worse than mistakes. And but I did what I did because of compassion. And it wasn't, for me, it wasn't like a sexual thing. You know, if you saw the whole circumstances, you'd see what I mean. And I had a pretty wife at the time, and she met my needs and all that.
So there we go, people. He had a limited skill set, a limited number of tools, and that's an interesting way to describe his own dick, because that's what he was using. That was his toolbox. He was having sex with his patients. Some of those patients I've interviewed over the past 3 years, and they don't characterize it as consensual sex. They say flat out that Hamblin raped them in the basement office of his Provo home, because he was operating out of a home office on the basement level of his home in Provo, and therefore what he was doing, it wasn't consensual sex, it was an outright sexual assault. That's what we're looking at here. We're looking at a sexual predator who had a license to practice as a clinical psychologist in Utah. And another episode that we're going to be doing here in the future, whether it's a live stream or a formal long-form episode, we're going to be looking at therapists in the state of Utah, including some that are linked to David Hamblin and to the Leavitt family, who are alleged to have behaved in a sexually inappropriate manner with their patients in therapy. And so I would highly advise you to come back to the channel and check for content. We are going to be doing more video content. But that's Hamblin admitting to what he did. He admitted it back in the early 2000s to the Division of Occupational and Professional Licensing, or DOPL. He lost his license as a therapist as a result of it. DOPL didn't expand their investigation beyond the admissions that Hamblin made that he was having a sexual relationship with his patients. If they had, they probably would have found Tobias Schroeder and numerous other victims, both adults and minors, based on my research over the past 3 years. And if law enforcement was doing its job in the present day, they'd find out that in American Fork, there's a private residence where Hamblin still operates what he calls his healing circles out of. And he's still allegedly sexually abusing adults and minors in those sessions. And he uses peyote to facilitate it. He administers incapacitating doses of peyote. He allegedly uses other drugs like Cambo and marijuana and whatnot. And he conducts these so-called therapy sessions there where he basically drugs people and has sexual intercourse with them, or he sexually abuses them. And that's something I've talked with someone who has been present at those healing circles within the last 3 years. I've talked with multiple people who've been present over the past decade. And so he's not going to stop until he dies or he's in prison. And even in prison, he will find somebody to sexually abuse. That's how he operates. And here's the thing I want to say to people out there watching. Pedophiles don't rehabilitate. Pedophiles don't get better. Pedophiles don't change. Rapists don't rehabilitate. They don't change. Sexual predators in general do not rehabilitate or change or recover. They rape and they sexually abuse others until they're incarcerated or until they die. Those are the two cures for pedophilia and for being a sexual predator or sexual abuser. Is you're either incarcerated and you're put in prison where you can't have access to a child or to an adult victim, unless, of course, it's another prisoner, or you die. And the average pedophile has between 140 to 185 victims over the course of their lifetime. Somebody like Hamblin probably has more than that, because he's been active since at least the 80s, and that we're coming up on almost 50 years. And if his daughters are to be believed, he started abusing them shortly after they were brought home from the hospital. In fact, one of the episodes of abuse described in the Hamblin victim statements is abuse that Hamblin and others in his group committed against his daughter Miriam after she was brought home from the hospital. So within days of her birth, they were digitally penetrating her. They were orally sodomizing her. She was a newborn. And this is a ritual or an ordinance that the LDS Church of Satan allegedly performs on newborns almost immediately after they're born. The men of the group get together for the females, and the females of the group get together for the males, and they exert their dominance over them and initiate them into the group as newborns by sexually abusing them. That's the level of what's allegedly going on here. And so when we talk about this, we're talking about it in the context of something that is very real, that David Leavitt, in that earlier video, which I'm going to play again for anybody who's late to the podcast, I'm going to play it again so that anybody who wants to see it can see David Leavitt acknowledge the reality of ritual abuse. I think that that's absolutely informative, that before he denied that there was an organized ring of ritual abuse in Utah County, he admitted that it was true. He said that he believed Catherine Hamblin was credible, and that he knew someone, David Hamblin, his former Elders Quorum president, who engaged in that type of abuse. So here's David Leavitt again.
Watch and listen. More than 2 years before that press conference, Leavitt sat down for a different interview and was asked if he thought ritualistic sex abuse was real. He went on to describe Hamblin and his own accuser, calling her a victim.
Do I think that occurs? Yeah, I think it occurs. I know some victims of it. Yeah, I know some victims of it. I was not in a position to prosecute it. Who was into Native American stuff, he'd kill deer and get deer hearts and drink their blood and drink the deer's blood.
At the time, Leavitt was under investigation by Homeland Security. These clips are now evidence in that case. We want to warn you, some of them are very graphic.
How do you train a dog to roll over when it's time to roll over? You do it by giving a reward and repetition. If a man wants to program some little girl to give immoral sex anytime he wants to, you start young and give rewards. It's unfortunately I've never, it's the same way help a child learn how to make their bed.
Yesterday, after Hamblin's arrest, we asked David Leavitt through his spokesperson for a comment. We were told, no, he does not comment on pending cases. Apparently, that did not stop him in June. Reporting in studio tonight, Adam Herbets, Fox 18 News, Utah.
So, there you have it. There's David Leavitt, former Utah County attorney, former chief prosecutor for Utah County, former candidate for Attorney General, talking about how he knew someone, a former neighbor and family friend, who was killing deer, drinking their blood, sexually abusing a child. He knew that it was real, and then, less than 2 years later, he has a press conference in which he denies the existence of an organized ring of abusers in Utah County, because he finds out that his name is in that victim statement filed in 2013 with the Provo Police Department. That's the level. And in the Hamblin victim statements, the girls explicitly talk about how the LDS Church of Satan has alleged gatekeepers throughout the state of Utah. And those gatekeepers are embedded in positions of power to intercept allegations against members of the Church of Satan. They're doctors, they're psychiatrists, they're attorneys, they're judges, they're police officers. And people, let me tell you something, like over the last 3 years, I've heard the same allegations made by multiple victims of ritual abuse. And one of the more disturbing things about it is I've heard a lot of people talk about this in the context of, oh, it's not real, couldn't possibly be real. And I'll be the first one to tell you that in August of 2022, when I first became aware of David Lee Hamblin through a private client's project, I thought it was just bullshit. I thought there was no way that this could happen, because in no ward or stake that I was ever a part of as a Latter-day Saint could anything like this conceivably happen, because there were so many eyes on everybody. Like we were all looking at each other. I mean, hell, we were, our whole social life was with each other. And like your ward family was all you ever saw. Your ministering brothers and sisters were the only people you ever saw. Like, I mean, we had a game night every week with the same couples. Like, I got my hair cut by one of our close friends in the ward's wife. So it seemed utterly implausible to me. And it started to become a lot more plausible. As time went on, I found more corroboration for it, which I write about at Investigations on Ritual Abuse over on Substack, and investigationsonritualabuse.com, which is where I put a lot of the source material. I'm absolutely convinced that the Hamblin sisters are telling the truth, that this is real, that this has happened, and that all of this is an ongoing phenomenon in the state of Utah. Gadianton robbers are real. Now, I've since left the church because I tried to go up the chain of command in the church to report this and to turn over evidence that I had found. And to my knowledge, they never held a church court. They never held a high council for any of these people. And some of these people, even if you don't believe the allegations of sexual abuse against them, they're involved in direct violations of the word of wisdom and the law of chastity. Like, that are it's indisputable that they're engaged in the use of illegal drugs, controlled substances, as part of separate religious ordinances outside of the church. So they have dual membership in Native American churches that use peyote and other substances as part of their religious rites, and they hold membership in those groups, as well as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which anybody who's ever been a Latter-day Saint knows is a huge no-no. But this is what's going on. And so what I would say to you is, Church of Jesus Christ has a problem, but one of the things that I've noticed, having come out to Utah, is that it's a different church out here. It's not the same church it was, or the same church it is anywhere else. So in Utah, a lot of what I call high strangeness is occurring out in the open here. Um, there's just no way around it. And so people like David Lee Hamblin and David Leavitt, the two Davids as I call them, basically operate with impunity. And one of the things the church does is it prioritizes image over truth. And as a result, when something like this comes up, the church will do whatever it can to cover it up. They would rather have these people operating with impunity within their ranks than deal with the problem and expel them. Now, with that said, eventually it reached a point where David Lee Hamblin was excommunicated from the church in the early 2000s. He was excommunicated from the LDS Church of Satan, according to his daughters, because he'd become so crazy, even a bunch of satanic ritual abusers could not abide his continued presence in the group. He was drawing too much attention. He kept getting arrested for poaching. He kept getting arrested for possessing eagle feathers, because what he was trying to do was meld the teachings of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the so-called LDS Church of Satan, and a Native American church called Oklahoma Native American Church under James Warren Flaming Eagle Mooney. That's what the guy called himself. He was trying to meld all three of those into his own belief system. And as a result, he was calling too much unwanted attention to himself with the arrest and everything else that was going on. And so he was kicked out of both mainline churches, if you could call it that. That is, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints excommunicated him, and the LDS Church of Satan allegedly held an excommunication hearing in which they kicked him out. And they stage managed his divorce, if you believe his daughters and what they wrote in the victim statements. And so what I would say to you is that's what you're faced with. You either believe it or you don't. On Investigations of Ritual Abuse and Substack, we have compiled a great deal of evidence to substantiate what the Hamblin sisters are saying, to corroborate what they're saying in terms of the family relationships, the fact that this is a multi-generational family group operating within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that its members are tied to multiple allegations of abuse. And so this has been our IRA Livestream 104, the fourth one of these that we've done. We're going to be doing more and more of these as time goes on. And I would encourage you to be here every night or to watch it afterwards. Thanks for watching, and we will see you on the next one of these that we do, probably tomorrow night or Thursday night. This is Goel from Investigations in Ritual Abuse signing off on our fourth